Hi, hello. So, this is me reporting in on my experience getting a doctor in Ontario 2026 and pursuing an autism diagnosis and how it's going so far. In my last video, I talked about the distress that I went through when I was at a standstill in the process of meeting my doctor for the first time. Unlike some people on the spectrum who cannot take phone calls, make phone calls, be on phone calls in general, I can. They're stressful, but the problem was that I physically struggled to take calls at my lived location and financially with my text only phone plan. Someone at the offices that I'd been assigned to with Healthcare Connect, somewhere along the way, had input my email incorrectly. And though I'd confirmed it with them several times over, I wasn't allowed to do the first meet and greet with my doctor until I'd filled out online forms, which were failing to be sent to the proper email. I was in a stalemate and pretty mentally flustered trying to address the situation without being overcome with worry that I'm going to piss someone off, while also extremely bothered that someone else not doing their job meant that I've spent months not receiving medical service that I would otherwise be able to. Advocating for myself is very hard for me and often quite upsetting. Thankfully, after sending them a physical letter in the mail outlining my situation and getting them to call me from another number, which took several more times before the email finally got fixed, and I ended up waiting extra weeks because I just didn't have the mental bandwidth to be more assertive, I did get the email to get me onto the portal. I filled out my paperwork as soon as I got it and made an appointment within that week to meet my new nurse practitioner. Honestly, the availability was that I could have seen them the next day, but I needed some time to prepare. I typed up and printed out a couple papers to take with me, jot notes of the things that I wanted to talk about, being my acid reflux, my severe autoimmune response to things, and my self diagnosis, as well as some of my medical history that I would have to probably remember the dates for. And now I am here to report how well it went. I think it went really well. Or at least I think it went as well as I could have expected it to go. My new assigned nurse practitioner is a very nice lady who I'll be referring to as Joan. She said she has a daughter around my age, which is early 30s, and she has a full head of gray hair with an amount of wrinkles and body proportions that I assume she's in her late 50s, early 60s, but she looks quite healthy for that. Not running marathons type of older person, but she's certainly not hitting a point of struggle with daily tasks. My first impression of her was that she's kindly. She makes me feel like she wants to take proper care of me. Whereas, unfortunately, sometimes healthcare workers can make me feel like I'm being an inconvenience for needing help. I got the distinct impression that she isn't going to mind if the process that I need for something isn't an easy plug and play. With the way that she greeted me and listened and the back and forth that we had, that's exactly what I needed from her to feel like I could try and say what I needed to. I'd put in the forms that I filled out for their portal before coming into the appointment that I'd like to seek a neurodivergent diagnosis of some form. So that was on the list of topics which she already knew about. And as we went through my medical history and concerns, eventually it came to that. And she asked me about it pretty open endedly, but also with a bit of a tie in that tripped me up. Of course, I'd rehearsed this conversation for the whole last week, but the act of saying it out loud and improvising what angle to actually come in on is always paralyzing. I'm going to be paraphrasing for this, obviously, but she basically asked, "What makes you feel like you would like to pursue a diagnosis? I see you have listed anxiety, so do you think it could be an extension of that?" And thank God I already liked her and didn't feel like she was judging me. Her tone and the way that she leaned in really helped to tell me internally these questions are not a conflict. They're not a judgment. She is not dismissing me. She is asking for context, and I need to give that. A big problem for me is that answering questions that feel like I'm justifying myself always sets like my fucking nervous system off. Internally, I'm shaking, I'm sweating, all my senses become overwhelming, and I have to fight the urge to either clam up or start crying. But I did my best to stay calm and say what I'd practiced. I'd been making eye contact the whole time so far in the appointment, but I did have to look away to say what I had to next. I'd already prefaced the anxiety that I feel with Joan by saying that it's not new. I've always been this way, and now I tried to explain that it's more than just anxiety. I was afraid of this going into the appointment, that I might not be able to say the right things so someone who hasn't experienced this can understand without being too overbearing in my evident self diagnosis. Because, I don't know, it feels like it'll make medical professionals more disinclined to accept my line of reasoning or knowledge if it seems like I'm too dead set on the answer already. Because what do I know, right? I don't think Joan is like that. I don't think she'd react like that, but it's reasonable for anyone taking their job seriously in the medical field to take anything that their patient says with a grain of salt, too. So, I went into this knowing that I need to be specific, but also not so specific that it feels scripted, like I'm trying to get something inauthentically. I'm as afraid of not being believed as I am having to explain things. So as soon as she related it back to anxiety, I knew I had to be firm that it's not just generalized anxiety. The reason I want to pursue a diagnosis first is because I know that anxiety is different or presents differently for people with autism than a generalized anxiety that can be treated because it's inherent, integrated. It affects every aspect of my life and how I interact and approach things. And you can't medicate that away, and talk therapy doesn't provide the same benefits. So pursuing those were things that I'm not entirely interested in doing to waste my time and make me feel bad that I'm not getting better. So I made sure and I told Joan that I've always been like this. It's affected me all my life. And because I feel the need to contextualize things to be understood, I told her that I'd told my mom that I had, or I thought I had, an anxiety disorder when I was a teenager, but we didn't pursue it, and that I've just dealt with it the best that I could, always. But adding that over the last year, I ran into testimonials of overlooked, late diagnosed women with autism, and that their experience, what they relayed, was exactly like mine. As I explained that, I started crying. I did the thing that I always do when I start crying because I'm talking about something and my voice got all wobbly and I got louder because I'm trying to choke the words out. And she looked really sympathetic and handed me a Kleenex. I'm actually glad that she asked questions following me starting to cry because I think it would have been worse if we just sat in it, me just me sitting there crying. I needed something to move on to, and I'd just blabber on forever trying to say enough in whatever combination that might make someone else understand, which usually makes them more confused, unfortunately. She asked if I might have bottled resentment about not pursuing treatment when I was younger, and I hadn't even thought about that, like that she'd ask. Like, of course I do, but I just said, yeah, probably, which is about all I could get out because I didn't really want to get into it. Like, once I see a therapist or something, I could try to get into that, but it's also complicated. My mom tried, but how could she understand what I was going through when I'd hide it with all of my masking, like trying to appear normal, to be the perfect kid, and on the outside, I was. Joan asked if my partner's family, whom I'm living with right now, know about my self diagnosis and whether I'm in a safe place. And I said I hadn't told them yet because they are safe for me right now and that I'm waiting to bring it up until I have confirmation. Like they're good to me regardless, so it wouldn't change much. I really just want answers to validate what I struggle with and why. And Joan concluded by validating me. She said that normally they'd start with trying to treat anxiety with medication and counseling, but we could start with pursuing a neurodivergent diagnosis instead. And while she was saying that, my heart nearly seized because I was so afraid going into this that I was going to be forced into doing the other procedural things first. That I'd have to spend months buying and trying medication just so I could tell them it's not enough because I'm pretty certain I'm autistic and my lived experience is autistic. So these things aren't going to help, but I'm going to feel compelled to try anyway because that's what happens a lot with doctors. You have to try it their way and tell them, no, it doesn't work. It was never going to work, but you have to do it anyway so they believe you. Joan also asked if I'd like to start by talking with the psychologist that's attached to their clinic and talk about all of this. It's a building with like kind of one of each service, from like a nurse practitioner to a pediatrist. I think that's the one for kids, to a social worker, which is all really cool and handy, I think. So I nodded yes, and I said I would like that. Thank you. I was so relieved that I was being heard because if we'd got caught on the generalized anxiety thing, I wouldn't have been able to advocate otherwise. It'd feel like an argument to me to be like, no, I don't think that's it. And what I'd went through explaining things so far was bad enough. I was wearing a medical mask the whole time, and I think that helped a lot with me being able to calm down again quickly because there's so much less of me and my face to perceive that I could get myself suppressed and back on track to have a conversation. Before I left, though, she gave me a tetanus shot because I didn't know when I'd had my last one, and it's a pretty high exposure risk with my line of job. So I was eager to let her to do it right then. And while I was taking my arm out of my sleeve to get the shot, I showed her my arms, the scarring, and the wounds. And I said skin picking, but when she replied, that's probably related to anxiety too, that we'll look into, I got worried again about getting pinned into generalized anxiety, so I specified like actually it's from me stimming. Because it is stimming. It's negative stimming that I do constantly. And that was awkward because Joan asked, "What?" So I reiterated stimming like a question, but she responded that she didn't know what that was. Um Unable to elaborate, I just said um it's part of the it's an autistic trait. And then she just nodded politely and confirmed as I was leaving that I'd hear from the office about when I can talk to the psychologist. So I think that went really well. I like my nurse practitioner. She listened to me and was sympathetic. I'm glad we ended up where we did, but it does worry me the amount of rounding back to generalized anxiety that Joan did, because to a neurotypical person, that's something they can understand, and I can't explain to them how it's different. It's not just anxiety. I'm hardwired like this. And I worry too that even though I did break down and cry, outside of that, I masked probably a bit too well. Like, we chatted well. I was really sociable because I felt comfortable with her for the most part. I think. I think I was being really sociable. So, it really must seem like I can't be autistic because she can't see what's happening on the inside. Because, oh my god, I was a mess on the inside. And once I got back in the car with my partner, I had a little bit of a cry there too because that was so stressful and relieving and big and scary. And I did it. I did it. I've acquired a designated nurse practitioner and we're moving forward with getting me a diagnosis. And I'm going to talk with a psychologist soon. And I'm feeling good. I'm feeling like I can get through this process. And I'm so grateful I got paired with someone who cared about what I felt and had to say and how I wanted to approach things rather than force us down another path from the start. Because knowing me, that'd just mean that I'd never get the help that I need because I wouldn't be able to speak for myself to get there after that first dismissal. So I'll post another update about how things go with the psychologist. I hope they can streamline my ability to get an assessment once they recognize how blatant my autistic traits are and how much they affect my life. Maybe this won't be as painful a process as most people suffer, it seems. Here's hoping. Okay,